You brought up the magic words tax code because that's my next question. On federal income tax, this is from the audience, do you support a flat tax, the same percentage regardless of your income, with no standard deduction? And we'll start with Commissioner Conk.
Well, I think that there's a common understanding that the tax code needs to be changed and reformed, close up some of the loopholes. But as far as a flat tax, I do support that, but I won't say I agree with all those numbers that you said exactly. I like the idea of it, but I want to be able to make sure I fully understand what we're talking about, giving the exact numbers.
Representative Copeland?
I would support a flat tax. I think that the Internal Revenue Code is one of the most befuddling stacks of paper Washington has produced. It certainly supports some industry. Maybe that's how they create jobs. The accountants and the lawyers and all the rest that get involved in trying to help people navigate those waters and save on their taxes. But the bottom line is taxes are too high, the tax code is complex, it's antiquated, and it needs to be replaced.
Commissioner Gettle?
And if you've been in business, you find yourself sometimes trying to figure out, now what can I do before the end of the year so I can save some taxes? And you're making decisions based upon the tax considerations rather than what's truly good for your business and what's good for your customers or good for the market. The tax code influences so much economic behavior that it distorts what's truly efficient in our marketplace. And that's always kind of bothered me. And so a flatter tax system reduces that kind of imposition from on high on the behavior of human individuals. And I think that would be a better system if we had a flatter tax structure.
Representative Grandy?
Yes, I do support a flat tax, or even maybe even looking at a fair tax. I think we need to redo the structure of the tax, the whole tax structure as it stands. One of the things that would be great about the flat tax is the fact that we could eliminate the whole IRS area and not have to deal with those types of things, saving the nation a great deal of money.
Commissioner Kramer?
I've advocated a flat tax for a very, very long time. I like a flat income tax. I think that was the specific question. I think sales tax, while it can make some sense, has a tendency, it's unpredictable, I guess. It goes up with inflation, it is regressive. I like a flat income tax. I would propose one deduction, that being charity. Charity is the one thing that replaces government. But I also realize that there's compromise, that there are other ideas. Senator Santorum proposes 5 deductions, others propose maybe a few more, a few less. I think that smart people can get together and find out what that perfect thing is, and we don't want perfect to be the enemy of good, but we definitely need a flatter tax. We need to create predictability. We need to create certainty in the minds of investors and in the minds of job creators and in the minds and hearts of families. And I think it'll go a long way, frankly, toward creating an investment climate that gets this economy going again.
Mr. Olson?
I think we should work towards bringing the income tax completely out of existence. I think it has to be done gradually because we have a massive debt that needs to be taken care of. So we should get rid of the things that are more complex and unnecessary first. I think that I run a small business, and the amount of taxes I have to file for a use tax for equipment that I purchase over the internet and don't pay a tax on, it's not worth the time to process to pay that tax. And I imagine that's the case with a lot of small businesses. I have no idea how much, and there was a problem with it, so it goes back and forth. Many hours of my time are spent, many hours of someone in this town trying to figure out what's going on. And I think for very small businesses, we should just eliminate their taxes. And I think for income tax, we should start with overtime. If you're working those extra hours, you should get your money. I think ultimately sorry.
All right, we are coming to the end of this, so I have one more question that was given to me by the audience. I'll start with Representative Copeland on this one. What is the government's role in regard to taking care of the poor?
Well, the government's role is much larger than it used to be in regard to taking care of the poor. And I would submit that the government does not do a very good job of taking care of the poor. The problem is that individuals and churches and charities historically have done a wonderful job. Now, we live in a society today where we have government programs that do that. Our own Constitution in the state of North Dakota allows for that. So, do I believe in a safety net of some sort? I certainly believe ours is messed up, and I think there are many ways it could be improved. But government has taken a role, and it would take a great deal of effort to unravel that. But I think what should happen, it was mentioned earlier that a charitable deduction is a good idea. I agree with that, because it rewards people who are out there doing this privately. They can do it much more effectively, much more efficiently, and in a way that's a hands-on help to people in need versus a nameless, faceless government hundreds or thousands of miles away.
Commissioner Gettle.
I think government's primary role is to permit and encourage and incent the private sector to address the problems of the poor. I had the opportunity to work on the White House's faith-based and community initiative, which was about that. It kind of got gobbled up and derailed in many places, but I think at rock bottom that concept is quite good, that we empower community organizations that are located in a community to try to address some of the needs of those who who need a hand up. Not a handout, but a hand up. So the more the private sector can do, the better. Now we have a whole system that addresses that. We're Social Security and Medicaid, and we can't pull the rug out from under those who are relying upon that system either. So if we could, around the edges, begin to demonstrate what the private sector could do, and I think do more compassionately and more effectively, and then see how that works as a tool to kind of have less government and more community and faith-based involvement.
Representative Grandy.
Thank you. You know, I've always felt that if government is going to take a role in the for the poor, it was that only to take care of those that absolutely could not take care of themselves. But in that, what has happened over time here is that we never used to have this as a question. This shouldn't even be an issue. But the churches and families have advocated their role to the government. And we, as a society, must take that back. It is what society is supposed to take care of. You're supposed to have that church and family taking care of each other and amongst the neighbors. You know, I find it very telling in our society where we used to come home and sit on the front porch. We don't have front porches anymore. We pull into a garage that is your front of your house, and you close the door and you don't even know who your neighbors are. That's where our society has gone wrong, and we need to get back to reaching out to our neighbors and our friends.
Commissioner Kramer.
Well, I would agree 100% with Betty, and I would say this, that it is very unfortunate that government charity has come to replace an incentive to work. It has incented bad behavior. We have created such a welfare state with government charity that more people find it easier to be takers of government funds than they are producers in our economy. I also want to agree with her on this point. I grieve that our culture, that our society, that our charities, that our churches have abdicated this responsibility. It should be an embarrassment not to the government, but an embarrassment to religious organizations and churches and faith-based people that 96% of all hunger programs are funded by the government. That's not an indictment on government, that's an indictment on us. That's an indictment on us. So the next time we complain about the government being too involved in something, let's not forget that the government can only get involved in the areas where we open the door and let them come into it. So I would be an advocate for a cultural change as well.
Mr. Olson.
I'd have to agree that I'd like to see it moved outside of the government, and especially in the federal government. I don't think it's the role of the federal government to do that sort of thing. If it needs to be done, it can be done at the state level, where it's a little bit closer to home and the problems can be addressed more specifically, less waste, that sort of thing. I think it's not effective. There was a person who I hired at one point who quit because he figured out that he made almost as much money collecting his government assistance. And I think that was a state program. That's something that really bothers me, and I wouldn't support any legislation that I thought might do that.
Commissioner Cog.
Well, we talked a lot about the economy, but I'll tell you what, the economy's got to get going, because then people will give more money to charities. I mean, it's easy to give the churches a hard time, but the people sitting in the pews are not giving the money they used to give because they don't have the money. After I did some United Way work after September 11th, and there's a huge outpouring of giving. But over the last few years, people are worried about their checkbooks. They're not giving as much. So the role of government, I think, is to set the conditions like we talked about before. But also there also has to be a role of government to quit giving the money out when some of these programs need to come to an end, because otherwise we'll never balance this budget.
All right, and we've come to the end of the House debate portion of our evening. I'd like to thank the audience for their questions and the questions that were emailed to me, and I'd like to thank these candidates for being very honest and open about their opinions on the issues. Thank you so much.
Okay, again, thank you very much for all. We have 5 here that made it tonight, 1 could not make it this evening. We're going to take a 5-minute break here. There are restrooms out there. The rest of the evening is going to be rather fast-paced. Next is for the Senate, and we have 1 candidate here, and so that 1 candidate will still go to work by the rules. Have 1 minute for the question, and so as to not be long-winded on the various questions. And we'll probably have about 7 questions, so you can see how fast the next 2, the Senate, along with the governor race for the candidates will be. We have 1 present for each. We'll get underway in about 5 minutes.